After inheriting $10 million, my daughter-in-law pushed me down the stairs, hoping I wouldn't survive. My son lied to the police, saying I fell accidentally. When they returned to finish their plan, who they found sitting beside my bed made them freeze in terror. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. I'm Eleanor Davidson, 68 years old, and 2 weeks ago I was supposedly the luckiest woman in America. My late brother Harold had surprised everyone by leaving me his entire fortune when he passed. $10 million, just like that. I should have known that kind of money would bring out the worst in people, especially in my own family. But let me back up to how this nightmare began. It started 3 days after the lawyer's visit, when Jessica, my daughter-in-law, suggested I move in with them temporarily while we figured out the inheritance details. She was all smiles and concerned touches on my arm. "Mom Eleanor," she said in that sugary voice she uses when she wants something, "it just makes sense. We can take care of you, and you can take care of us." My son Michael nodded eagerly from across their granite kitchen island. "It's perfect, Mom. We'll be one big happy family." The way his eyes gleamed when he said it should have been my first warning. I'd raised Michael to be better than this. His father, Tom, and I had taught him about integrity, about earning what you get. But somewhere along the way, Jessica's influence had twisted him into someone I barely recognized. Someone who saw his mother's inheritance as his personal windfall. The first week went smoothly enough. Jessica cooked my favorite meals. Michael called me every morning to check how I slept. They were performing for me, putting on quite the show. I almost felt guilty for the suspicious thoughts creeping into my mind. Almost. Then came the papers. Michael spread them across the dining room table with the confidence of a lawyer, though he'd never finished college. "Mom, we need to talk about estate planning. Jessica's been researching tax implications." I looked at the documents, my reading glasses perched on my nose. Power of attorney forms, healthcare directives, and buried in the middle, transfer agreements that would essentially hand over control of my inheritance to them for management purposes. "This seems awfully complicated," I said, setting down my coffee cup. "Maybe I should have my own lawyer review these." The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Jessica's smile became strained. "Oh, Mom Eleanor, that would just slow everything down. We're family. You can trust us." Trust. That word tasted bitter in my mouth as I remembered how eagerly they'd welcomed me into their home. How quickly they'd cleared out their guest room, pushing aside years of accumulated junk to make space for their newfound golden goose. "I'll think about it," I said, folding the papers carefully. That night, I heard them arguing in hushed tones through the thin walls. Jessica's voice sharp with frustration. Michael's defensive. I couldn't make out all the words, but I caught enough. Stubborn old woman, and "we need that money now, and she won't live forever anyway." My blood ran cold. This wasn't about taking care of me. This was about taking everything from me. The next morning, Jessica was all sunshine and coffee, as if I hadn't heard her plotting my demise 12 hours earlier. "Good morning, Mom Eleanor. How did you sleep?" she chirped, sliding a plate of perfectly arranged fruit in front of me. "Like a baby," I replied, watching her face for any tells. In my 30 years as a high school principal, I'd gotten pretty good at spotting liars. Jessica was amateur hour compared to the teenagers I'd dealt with. "Wonderful. Michael and I were just discussing those papers from yesterday. We really think it would be best to get everything settled quickly, for your peace of mind." Peace of mind. Right. The only thing giving me peace of mind was the fact that I hadn't signed a single document yet. Michael appeared in the doorway, fully dressed for work at 7 a.m., unusual for someone who typically rolled out of bed at 8:30. "Hey, Mom, I took the liberty of calling that lawyer friend of mine, Marcus Webb. He can see you this afternoon to go over everything." I raised an eyebrow. Marcus Webb was Jessica's cousin, a fact they seemed to be conveniently omitting. How thoughtful. But I already have a lawyer. Harold's attorney, Mr. Patterson, has been handling everything beautifully. Jessica's coffee cup clattered against the saucer. "Oh, but Mom Eleanor, Mr. Patterson specializes in estate law. You need someone who understands financial planning. Tax implications, family trusts." "Family trusts?" I interrupted. "When did we start talking about family trusts?" Michael jumped in quickly. "It's just an option, Mom. to protect your assets, to make sure the family is taken care of if anything happens to you. If anything happens to you. The way he said it, so casually, made my skin crawl, like they were already planning my funeral. I stood up from the breakfast table, suddenly needing space. I think I'll take a walk around the neighborhood, clear my head. Oh, be careful, Mom Eleanor, Jessica called after me. Some of these sidewalks are uneven. We wouldn't want you to fall. As I walked down their pristine suburban street, I called Mr. Patterson from my cell phone. Eleanor, how are you settling in with the inheritance? That's what I wanted to discuss. Michael and Jessica are pushing for me to sign some documents. Power of attorney, financial transfers. It all seems very rushed. There was a pause. Eleanor, I have to advise extreme caution. I've seen too many cases where family members try to gain control of inheritances through seemingly innocent paperwork. Don't sign anything without having me review it first. That's exactly what I plan to do. Good. And Eleanor, be very careful who you trust right now. $10 million makes people do terrible things. When I returned from my walk, Jessica was in the kitchen on her phone, speaking in low, urgent tones. She quickly hung up when she saw me. Who was that, dear? Oh, just my sister. Boring family stuff. But her hands were shaking slightly as she put the phone down. That afternoon, they both conveniently had appointments, leaving me alone in the house for the first time since I'd arrived. I used the opportunity to do some investigating of my own. Their home office was unlocked, and I found files that made my stomach turn. Credit card statements showing massive debt, late payment notices, and most disturbing of all, printed articles about inheritance law, specifically focusing on mental competency challenges and the easiest ways to gain power of attorney over elderly relatives. They weren't just planning to take my money. They were planning to have me declared incompetent if I didn't cooperate willingly. Armed with this knowledge, I spent the next few days playing the role of the trusting mother-in-law while secretly preparing my defense. I called Mr. Patterson and scheduled a full mental competency evaluation with a geriatric psychiatrist. I also arranged for a security deposit box at a different bank, where I could store important documents away from prying eyes. But Jessica and Michael were growing impatient. The pressure was mounting daily. Mom, we really need to move forward with the financial planning, Michael said over dinner. Every day we wait costs us money in potential tax liabilities. Us? I asked sweetly. I wasn't aware you had any tax liabilities related to my inheritance. Jessica jumped in with her practiced laugh. Oh, you know what he means. Family finances affect everyone. We're all in this together. I smiled and nodded, playing my part. Of course, dear. I understand completely. But I was done playing games. That night, I called Harold's longtime housekeeper, Maria Santos. Harold had mentioned her in his will, leaving her a generous pension. If anyone knew the real story behind Harold's fortune, it would be her. Mrs. Davidson, I'm so sorry for your loss, Maria said when she answered. Mr. Harold spoke of you often. He was so excited about leaving you everything. Maria, can I ask you something confidential? Did Harold ever mention being concerned about family members trying to take advantage of the inheritance? There was a long pause. Mrs. Davidson, Mr. Harold was very specific about his wishes. He left everything to you because he trusted you. He said his nephews had already shown their true colors by trying to borrow money from him repeatedly. He didn't want them to get a single penny. My blood ran cold. Harold's nephews, Jessica's brothers. He was especially worried about pressure tactics, Mrs. Davidson. He made me promise to tell you that if anyone tried to rush you into financial decisions, you should run the other way. The puzzle pieces were falling into place. This wasn't just Michael and Jessica's scheme. This was a family conspiracy, and I was the target. The next morning at breakfast, Jessica seemed unusually nervous. She kept checking her phone and glancing toward the window. Expecting someone? I asked innocently. Oh no, just waiting for a delivery. But she wouldn't meet my eyes. Michael had already left for work, claiming an early meeting. The house felt different, charged with anticipation, like something was about to happen. I excused myself to use the bathroom upstairs, but instead I crept to the window overlooking the front yard. A dark sedan was parked across the street. 2 men inside. They'd been there for an hour. My heart started racing. This was it. Whatever they had planned was happening today. I quickly called Mr. Patterson. I need you to come to Michael's house immediately. Something's about to happen. Eleanor, what's wrong? I think they're planning to have me declared incompetent today. There are men outside, and Jessica's acting very strange. I'm calling the police and heading over now. Don't sign anything and don't be alone with them. But it was too late. I heard the front door open and voices in the foyer. Jessica was greeting someone, her voice bright and fake. She's upstairs. She's been acting very confused lately, very paranoid. We're so worried about her mental state. I recognized the second voice immediately. Dr. Richard Steinberg, a psychiatrist Michael had mentioned before. A man who, I was betting, owed them a significant favor. They were planning to have me committed. Right here, right now. I had maybe 5 minutes before they came upstairs. Time enough for one last phone call. I dialed 911 with shaking fingers. 911, what's your emergency? This is Eleanor Davidson. I'm at 247 Maple Street, and I believe I'm about to be unlawfully committed by family members trying to steal my inheritance. Ma'am, can you repeat that? My son and daughter-in-law are planning to have me declared mentally incompetent so they can control my $10 million inheritance. There's a psychiatrist here now, and I believe this is all fraudulent. I could hear footsteps on the stairs. They were coming. Ma'am, officers are en route. Can you stay on the line? I'll try. I shoved the phone into my sweater pocket, keeping the line open. Jessica appeared in the doorway with a tall, thin man in an expensive suit. Mom, Eleanor, this is Dr. Steinberg. Michael asked him to come check on you. We've been so worried about your mental state lately. Doctor. Steinberg stepped forward with a practiced, patronizing smile. Mrs. Davidson, your family is concerned about some confusion you've been experiencing. I'm here to help. What confusion? I asked calmly. I feel perfectly clear-headed. Jessica's eyes darted nervously. Mom, Eleanor, you've been saying some very strange things. Accusing us of trying to steal from you, talking about conspiracies. It's very concerning. Is it concerning that I found articles about mental competency challenges in your office? Or that I discovered your brothers have been pressuring Harold for money for years? Dr. Steinberg pulled out a clipboard. Mrs. Davidson, paranoid delusions are common in elderly individuals, especially during times of stress. I think it would be best if we had you evaluated at a facility where you can get proper care. The sirens were getting closer. I just needed to stall a little longer. Doctor, before we proceed, I'd like to see your credentials, and I'd like to call my own physician for a second opinion. That won't be necessary, Jessica interjected quickly. We've already made arrangements. Arrangements for what exactly? Dr. Steinberg opened his briefcase and pulled out commitment papers. Mrs. Davidson, we have a 72-hour psychiatric hold for your own safety. The sirens were right outside now. Jessica's face went white as she ran to the window. There are police cars outside, she said, her voice rising in panic. I smiled sweetly. Oh yes, I called them. You see, I'm not as confused as you thought. The front door burst open, and I heard heavy footsteps on the stairs. 2 officers appeared in the doorway, followed closely by Mr. Patterson. Mrs. Davidson, are you all right? The first officer asked. I'm perfectly fine, officer, but I believe these people were attempting to have me unlawfully committed in order to gain control of my inheritance. Doctor. Steinberg tried to maintain his composure. Officers, this woman is clearly delusional. She needs psychiatric care. Mr. Patterson stepped forward with his briefcase. Officer, I'm Mrs. Davidson's attorney. She recently passed a comprehensive mental competency evaluation with flying colors. Any attempt to have her committed without proper legal procedures would be fraudulent. Jessica started crying. We were just trying to help her. She's been so paranoid, so confused. Confused enough to call 911 when I suspected fraudulent activity? I asked. Confused enough to hire a lawyer and get a psychiatric evaluation? I'd say my judgment is pretty sound. The second officer was examining the commitment papers. Dr. Steinberg, these forms haven't been properly filed with the court. This appears to be an illegal detention attempt. Michael chose that moment to come running up the stairs, still in his work clothes, but clearly panicked. What's going on? Jessica called me saying there were police cars. He stopped dead when he saw the scene. His face went from confusion to realization to pure panic in about 3 seconds. Michael, I said calmly, I believe you and your wife need to explain to these officers why you thought it was appropriate to try to have me committed. That's when Jessica completely lost it. She's ruining everything. We need that money. Do you know how much debt we're in? Do you know what this inheritance could do for our family? And there it was, the truth, finally out in the open. The police spent the next 2 hours taking statements and examining evidence. Dr. Steinberg, it turned out, was under investigation by the medical board for questionable practices and shouldn't have been conducting evaluations. The commitment papers he'd brought were blank forms, not legally filed documents. Michael and Jessica were arrested for attempted fraud and unlawful detention. As they were led away in handcuffs, Jessica was still crying about how they'd only been trying to help me. Help themselves to my bank account, I muttered to Mr. Patterson as we watched the police cars drive away. Eleanor, you handled this brilliantly. Most people would have been fooled by their scheme. 30 years of dealing with manipulative teenagers taught me a few things about spotting lies. But as I stood in their empty house, surrounded by evidence of their greed and deception, I felt more sad than victorious. This was my son, the little boy I'd taught to ride a bike and helped with homework. Somewhere along the way, I'd lost him to greed and desperation. Mr. Patterson drove me to a hotel for the night while we figured out my next steps. In the quiet of the hotel room, I finally let myself feel the full weight of what had happened. My own family had tried to steal everything from me and have me locked away when I resisted. The next morning brought a call from Michael's lawyer. He wanted to make a deal. Mrs. Davidson, my clients are prepared to plead guilty to lesser charges in exchange for family reunification therapy and a promise not to pursue the inheritance. I almost laughed. A promise not to pursue my own inheritance? How generous of them. They're still your family, Mrs. Davidson. Surely there's room for forgiveness. There's room for many things, I replied. Forgiveness may come eventually. Trust, however, is gone forever. I hung up and called Maria Santos. Maria, I want to see Harold's house. I think it's time I understood exactly what he left me. Harold's estate was magnificent. A sprawling Victorian mansion overlooking the ocean, with gardens that looked like something from a magazine. Maria gave me a complete tour, showing me rooms filled with antiques, a library with first-edition books, and a wine cellar that probably cost more than most people's houses. Mr. Harold was very specific about this place, Maria explained as we stood on the wraparound porch. He said it should be a sanctuary for you, somewhere you could live in peace without anyone trying to take advantage of you. He knew this would happen, didn't he? He hoped it wouldn't, but yes, he was prepared for it. That's why he set up the inheritance the way he did. The money comes with certain protections built in. That afternoon, Mr. Patterson explained those protections. Harold had been smarter than I'd realized. The inheritance included not just the $10 million, but also stipulations that prevented anyone from pressuring me to share it. Any family member who attempted to defraud or manipulate me would be permanently cut off from any future considerations. He essentially made it legally impossible for them to benefit from any pressure tactics, Mr. Patterson explained. The more they push, the more they lose. I spent that night in Harold's house, my house now, walking through rooms that felt both foreign and welcoming. In his study, I found a letter he'd left specifically for me. Dear Eleanor, it began, if you're reading this, then you've likely discovered that money brings out both the best and worst in people. I hope your family proved me wrong, but if they didn't, please know that this house and this money are meant to give you freedom, not burden you with obligations to others. Live your life for yourself. You've earned it. I folded the letter carefully and tucked it into my purse. Harold had given me more than money. He'd given me permission to put myself first for perhaps the first time in my life. The phone rang. It was Jessica, calling from jail. Mom, Eleanor, please, we made a mistake. Can you drop the charges? We'll pay you back. We'll do anything. I looked out at the ocean, watching the waves crash against the rocks below the house. Jessica, the charges are out of my hands now. You committed crimes. But even if I could drop them, I wouldn't. But we're family. Family doesn't try to steal from each other. Family doesn't try to have each other committed. You made your choice when you decided I was worth more to you as a victim than as a mother. Please, we're going to lose the house. We're going to lose everything. Then you'll understand how I felt when you tried to take everything from me. I hung up and turned off my phone. Tomorrow, I'd start figuring out what my new life looked like. Tonight, I just wanted to sit in my beautiful house and feel grateful that Harold had loved me enough to protect me from my own family. 6 months later, I was hosting my first dinner party in the Ocean View dining room. The guests were an eclectic mix: Maria Santos, who'd become more friend than employee; my neighbor Mrs. Chen, a retired teacher like myself; Dr. Rebecca Walsh, the psychiatrist who'd conducted my competency evaluation and had become a trusted advisor; and surprisingly, Michael. My son had spent 3 months in minimum security prison, followed by extensive therapy. His marriage to Jessica hadn't survived the scandal, and he'd lost the house to bankruptcy. But something about hitting rock bottom had brought back glimpses of the man I'd raised. "Mom, this place is incredible," he said, looking around the dining room with its crystal chandelier and antique furniture. "Harold really wanted you to be comfortable. He wanted me to be safe," I corrected gently. "There's a difference." Dr. Walsh nodded approvingly. "It's important to distinguish between comfort and security. Eleanor has built both here." We were halfway through Maria's famous paella when Michael finally brought up what we'd all been dancing around. "Mom, I know I have no right to ask this, but I want you to know I'm not here because of the money. I'm here because I miss my mother." I studied his face, looking for the tells I'd learned to recognize, but all I saw was genuine remorse and exhaustion. "I miss my son too," I said quietly, "but we can't go back to the way things were." "Michael, too much has happened." "I know. I just hope we can build something new, something honest." Mrs. Chen, who'd been quietly observing, spoke up with the wisdom of her 83 years. "Forgiveness isn't about forgetting, dear. It's about choosing not to let the past poison your future." After dinner, Michael and I walked on the beach behind the house. The October air was crisp, and the waves provided a soothing soundtrack to our difficult conversation. "I keep thinking about Dad," he said, "about what he would say if he knew what I'd done." "Your father would be heartbroken," I replied honestly. "But he'd also believe in second chances. He always did. Jessica blames you for everything, you know. She tells anyone who'll listen that you're a vindictive old woman who destroyed her family." I almost smiled at that. "And what do you tell people?" "I tell them I destroyed my own family by getting greedy and losing sight of what actually matters." We walked in silence for a while, both lost in our own thoughts. Finally, Michael stopped and turned to face me. "Mom, I need to tell you something about why we really needed the money so badly." I braced myself for another excuse, another manipulation. But what came next surprised me. Jessica has a gambling addiction. Credit cards, online betting, casino trips. I've been covering her debts for 3 years, refinancing the house, borrowing against my retirement. I was drowning, and when we heard about your inheritance, it felt like salvation. "Why didn't you just ask for help?" "Because I was ashamed. Because I knew you'd tell me to leave her, and I thought I could fix it myself. I thought if we could just get access to some of your money, we could pay everything off and start fresh." I felt a familiar pang of maternal concern, followed immediately by anger at how he'd chosen to handle his problems. "So instead of asking for help, you decided to steal from me and have me committed." I know how it sounds. I know how wrong it was. But I wasn't thinking clearly. I was desperate. And Jessica kept saying you'd never miss the money, that you'd understand once we explained everything. "Michael, if you'd come to me honestly, explained the situation, asked for help with Jessica's addiction, I would have helped you. Not with millions of dollars, but with real solutions. Therapy, legal advice, financial planning." He nodded miserably. "I know that now. But Jessica said you'd just judge us, that you'd never approve of her anyway." "I didn't approve of her because I saw how she was changing you. But I would have supported you if you'd asked for support instead of trying to take everything from me." As we walked back toward the house, I felt something shifting in my chest. Not forgiveness exactly, but the possibility of it. Michael had made terrible choices, but they'd come from desperation and poor judgment, not pure greed. "Where do we go from here?" he asked as we reached the porch steps. "Very slowly," I replied, "with honesty, with boundaries, and with the understanding that trust, once broken, takes years to rebuild." He nodded. "I'd like to try if you'll let me." I looked at this man who was my son, who'd betrayed me, who was asking for a chance to earn his way back into my life. It would be easier to cut him off completely, to enjoy my wealth and my beautiful house without the complication of family drama. But as I looked up at the stars over the ocean, I thought about Harold's letter. He'd given me the freedom to choose my own path, and I chose to leave the door open, just a crack, for the possibility that my son might find his way back to being someone worthy of trust. "We'll see," I said finally. "We'll see." 2 years after the inheritance nightmare, I thought the worst was behind me. I was wrong. The doorbell rang on a Tuesday morning while I was tending to Harold's rose garden, now mine. Through the security camera Harold had wisely installed, I saw a woman in an expensive suit holding a briefcase. "Mrs. Davidson? I'm attorney Sarah Mitchell from Blackstone and Associates. I represent Jessica Stevens regarding the wrongful conviction case." Jessica was trying to overturn her conviction. Apparently, 3 months in minimum security hadn't taught her anything about accountability. I let Ms. Mitchell into the foyer but didn't offer her coffee. Some people don't deserve hospitality. "Mrs. Davidson, my client maintains that she was pressured into pleading guilty by inadequate legal representation. We have new evidence suggesting the entire incident was a misunderstanding blown out of proportion." I almost laughed. "A misunderstanding? Your client tried to have me illegally committed to steal my inheritance. That's one interpretation. We believe Jessica was genuinely concerned about your mental health and acted out of love, not greed. Love doesn't forge commitment papers." Ms. Mitchell opened her briefcase. "We have statements from Dr. Steinberg claiming he was misled about your condition by Jessica's husband, that Jessica herself was a victim of Michael's manipulation. Interesting strategy. Throw Michael under the bus and paint Jessica as another victim. Dr. Steinberg lost his medical license 6 months after our incident for conducting unauthorized psychiatric evaluations. His statements aren't exactly credible. Nevertheless, we're prepared to file an appeal. However, Jessica would prefer to resolve this privately. She's willing to publicly apologize and accept responsibility for her part in the misunderstanding in exchange for your support in overturning her conviction." The audacity was breathtaking. She wanted me to help clear her record after she'd tried to destroy my life. What exactly would I get out of this arrangement? Family reconciliation, peace of mind, the knowledge that you've helped a young woman learn from her mistakes. I walked to the window overlooking the ocean, buying time to process this latest manipulation attempt. Jessica hadn't learned anything except new ways to avoid consequences. "Ms. Mitchell, please tell your client that I wouldn't help her if she was drowning in my swimming pool. Good day." After the lawyer left, I called Mr. Patterson. "They're appealing the conviction and want my help overturning it." "Absolutely not. Eleanor, Jessica's conviction stands as protection for you. If it gets overturned, it sets a precedent that family members can attempt financial fraud without real consequences." That evening, Michael called. "Mom, did someone from Jessica's legal team contact you?" "They did. I told them exactly what they could do with their appeal." "Good." Jessica called me asking if I'd support her appeal. She actually thought I might help her after she blamed everything on me during the divorce proceedings. "Are you tempted?" "Hell no. Sorry, Mom, but absolutely not. Jessica made her choices. She can live with the consequences." I was proud of him for that response. His therapy was clearly working. 3 months later, the appeal was denied. Jessica's new lawyer hadn't been able to overcome the overwhelming evidence of fraud. But victory felt hollow when Michael arrived at my door with disturbing news. "Mom, there's something you need to know. Jessica's been contacting your neighbors, telling them stories about you." My stomach dropped. "What kind of stories?" "She's claiming you've become paranoid and vengeful, that you're using your money to destroy people's lives. Mrs. Chen mentioned it to me when I ran into her at the grocery store." I felt a familiar chill. "What exactly is she telling people? That you're unstable? That the family tried to help you, and you had them arrested out of spite? She's trying to turn the community against you." The next day proved Michael right. At the farmer's market, I noticed people avoiding eye contact. Conversation stopped when I approached. Mrs. Chen was notably absent from her usual vegetable stand. I decided to confront this head-on. I drove to Mrs. Chen's house and knocked on her door. "Eleanor," she said, her usual warm greeting replaced by cautious politeness. "May I come in? I think we need to talk." She hesitated, then stepped aside. "I suppose we should." In her living room, surrounded by family photos and the scent of jasmine tea, I faced my friend directly. "Someone's been telling you stories about me." Mrs. Chen looked uncomfortable. Eleanor, I don't want to get involved in family drama. What did Jessica tell you? She said you've become vindictive since inheriting the money, that your family tried to help you manage your finances, and you had them arrested for it. She seemed very upset, very sincere. I felt my temper rising, but I kept my voice steady. Did she mention trying to have me committed with fraudulent paperwork? Or the fact that she stole from me for months before I even knew about the inheritance? Mrs. Chen's expression shifted. She didn't mention those details. I imagine not. Mrs. Chen, in the 2 years you've known me, have I ever seemed vindictive? Have I ever used my money to hurt anyone? She shook her head slowly. No, you've been nothing but generous and kind. Then why would you believe Jessica's story over your own experience with me? Because family situations are complicated. Sometimes good people do desperate things when money is involved. I spent the next hour explaining the real story, showing Mrs. Chen the court documents I kept in my purse, the police reports, the evidence of Jessica's fraud. By the end, Mrs. Chen was apologetic and angry. I should have talked to you first. I'm sorry, Eleanor. It's not your fault. Jessica's very convincing when she wants to be. But the damage was spreading. Over the next week, I learned Jessica had contacted half the neighborhood, spinning her tale of victimization. Some people believed her, others reserved judgment. A few, thankfully, dismissed her entirely. The situation reached a breaking point when I found graffiti on my garden gate. Rich witch. That's when I decided Jessica needed to learn about consequences in a more permanent way. I called my private investigator, a woman named Patricia Stone, whom Mr. Patterson had recommended for background checks on potential household staff. I explained the situation and asked her to compile a complete dossier on Jessica's activities since her release from prison. I want to know everywhere she's been, everyone she's talked to, and every lie she's told. Patricia's report was enlightening. Jessica hadn't just been spreading lies about me. She'd been running a more comprehensive con game. She was telling potential employers that her conviction was based on false charges brought by a vindictive mother-in-law. She'd convinced a local charity that she was a victim of elder abuse who needed financial assistance. Most disturbing, she'd been dating a widower named Frank Morrison, telling him she was a nurse who'd been wrongfully accused of patient abuse by a difficult family. Eleanor, Patricia said as she handed me the file, this woman is a habitual liar. She's not just trying to rehabilitate her image. She's actively defrauding people. Frank Morrison was 74, recently widowed, and according to Patricia's research, quite wealthy. Jessica was playing the long game again, looking for her next mark. I made a decision that some might call vindictive. I prefer to think of it as protective. I arranged to accidentally encounter Frank at the coffee shop where Patricia had observed him and Jessica meeting. It wasn't hard to strike up a conversation. He was lonely, eager to talk, and I was a sympathetic fellow widow. I'm actually seeing someone new, he mentioned after we'd chatted for 20 minutes. A lovely woman named Jessica. She's been through such a difficult time. Oh, how wonderful. What's her last name? Stevens. Jessica Stevens. She's a nurse, very caring. I kept my expression neutral. That's nice. How did you meet? At a grief support group. She lost her husband in a terrible accident, and then her mother-in-law made false accusations against her. She had to go through a legal nightmare, but she's so brave about it. The lies were even more elaborate than I'd expected. A dead husband now, grief support groups, false accusations. Jessica had reinvented herself completely. Frank, this might sound strange, but I think you should be very careful. There have been cases of people targeting widowers with false stories. He looked skeptical. Jessica's not like that. She's genuine. I made a difficult decision. Frank, I need to tell you something, and you're not going to want to hear it. I explained everything. Who I was, who Jessica really was, the court records, the fraud conviction. Frank's face went from disbelief to anger to crushing disappointment. You're sure about this? I have documentation, police reports, court transcripts, everything. He was quiet for a long moment. She was going to move in with me next month. I was going to add her to my bank accounts so she could help manage my finances. My blood ran cold. Frank, please tell me you haven't given her any money yet. Just small amounts. A few hundred here and there for her therapy, for legal bills to clear her record. Jessica was already working him, just like she'd worked me and Michael. What are you going to do? I asked. I'm going to confront her, tonight. Frank, please be careful. Don't do it alone. Have a friend present, or do it in a public place. That evening, Frank called me. She denied everything at first, called you a vindictive liar, but when I showed her the court documents you gave me, she broke down and confessed. She said she was desperate, that she needed money for her family. What family? Her marriage to my son ended 2 years ago. Her parents, apparently, they're in debt because of legal bills from her case. Even in confession, Jessica couldn't tell the complete truth. Are you pressing charges? I don't know. She only took about $800, but Eleanor, what scares me is how completely I believed her. If you hadn't warned me, I would have signed over access to my entire retirement account. Frank decided not to press charges, but he did file a report with the police documenting Jessica's fraud attempt. It was enough to trigger a violation of her probation terms. 2 days later, I got a call from Detective Morrison, no relation to Frank, who'd handled the original case. Mrs. Davidson, Jessica Stevens has been arrested for probation violation and new fraud charges based on Mr. Morrison's complaint. She's claiming you orchestrated this to frame her. Detective, I simply warned a potential victim about her criminal history. Is that illegal now? Not at all. In fact, we appreciate citizens who help protect potential victims from known predators. Jessica's arrest made the local newspaper. Not front-page news, but visible enough that my neighbors who'd believed her stories began to reconsider their positions. Mrs. Chen brought me a basket of homemade cookies and a heartfelt apology. I should have known better than to believe gossip over my own experience with you. Other neighbors followed suit. The graffiti was cleaned off my gate, and several people volunteered to help watch my property for any further harassment. But the real test came when Michael visited that weekend. Mom, Jessica called me from jail. She's furious about what happened with Frank Morrison. I'm sure she is. She wants me to testify that you've been harassing her, trying to destroy her life out of revenge. I felt my chest tighten. Would Michael support his ex-wife against me after everything we'd worked to rebuild? And what did you tell her? I told her that you'd saved an innocent man from being defrauded, and that if she was still running cons on elderly victims, she deserved whatever consequences came her way. Relief flooded through me. Thank you. Mom, I need you to know something. Jessica contacted me 6 months ago asking me to help her appeal her conviction. She said if we both testified that the incident was a misunderstanding, we could get the charges dropped and split whatever money we could get from you afterward. And I told her she was insane if she thought I'd help her hurt you again. That's when she started this campaign to turn people against you. She figured if she couldn't get to your money through me, she'd try to isolate you socially. The depth of Jessica's manipulation was staggering. Even after prison, even after losing everything, she was still scheming to profit from my inheritance. Why didn't you tell me about her offer earlier? Because I was ashamed that I'd ever been married to someone so calculating. And because I was afraid you'd think I was tempted by her offer. Were you? He met my eyes directly. Not for a second. I've learned the difference between wanting money and needing self-respect. That evening, I sat on my porch watching the sunset over the ocean. Harold's house had indeed become my sanctuary, but it had also become something more. It was my fortress, protecting me from people who saw my wealth as their opportunity. I thought about Jessica, sitting in her jail cell, probably planning her next scheme. Some people never learn. They see consequences as obstacles to overcome rather than lessons to absorb. But I'd learned something too. Money doesn't corrupt people. It reveals who they already were underneath. Jessica had always been greedy and manipulative. Michael had always been weak and easily influenced. And I had always been stronger than I gave myself credit for. Tomorrow, I'd continue building the life Harold had wanted me to have. Tonight, I'd simply enjoy the peace that comes from knowing I could protect myself and others from predators who see kindness as weakness. 1 year later, I was hosting a garden party to celebrate the 3rd anniversary of Harold's passing and my inheritance. The guest list included genuine friends I'd made, neighbors who'd proven their loyalty, and Michael, who'd earned his way back into my good graces through consistent honesty and respect. The party was also serving a purpose Jessica couldn't have anticipated. I'd invited Frank Morrison, Detective Morrison, Mrs. Chen, and several other people who'd been touched by Jessica's manipulations. Not to gloat, but to create a network of people who could recognize and prevent similar schemes in the future. It's amazing how many predators target seniors, Dr. Walsh was saying to a group gathered near the Rose Garden. Financial abuse is epidemic in our communities. The key is communication, Detective Morrison added. If people had called Mrs. Davidson when Jessica first approached them, this could have been stopped immediately. Mrs. Chen nodded vigorously. We've started a neighborhood watch specifically for financial scams. If someone new starts asking for money or spreading stories about family drama, we verify everything before believing anything. Michael found me refilling the punch bowl. Mom, this is really something. You've turned your bad experience into community education. Harold would have appreciated that. He always believed in turning problems into solutions. Have you heard anything about Jessica's appeal? It was denied. Again. She's serving her full sentence this time, with additional time for the fraud charges from Frank. Do you think she'll try again when she gets out? I considered the question seriously. Probably, but she'll find it much harder now. Word travels fast in communities like ours, and she's burned too many bridges. Does that worry you? Not anymore. I've learned that the best defense against manipulators is transparency. The more openly we discuss these situations, the harder it becomes for predators to operate. As the party wound down and guests began to leave, Frank Morrison approached me with something in his hand. Eleanor, I wanted to give you this. He handed me a small wrapped package. It's not much, but I wanted you to know how grateful I am. Inside was a beautiful silver picture frame with an engraved message. To Eleanor Davidson, who saved more than my money. She saved my faith in human decency. Frank, this is lovely, but unnecessary. It's very necessary. Do you realize what you did? You could have let Jessica take advantage of me. You could have minded your own business and avoided all the drama that followed. But you chose to protect a stranger. Mrs. Chen overheard and joined us. That's what good people do. They protect others even when it costs them something. After everyone left, Michael and I sat on the porch, as we'd done so many times over the past year. Mom, can I ask you something personal? Of course. Do you ever regret not just giving us some money from the beginning? I mean, if you'd shared the inheritance, none of this would have happened. I thought about his question carefully. Michael, if I'd given you money immediately, what would you have learned? What would Jessica have learned? You both would have discovered that manipulating me worked, and you would have escalated from there. But maybe we would have been satisfied with just some help. Do you really believe that? Jessica stole from Frank Morrison even after failing to steal from me. She appealed her conviction twice. She tried to turn my neighbors against me. Does that sound like someone who would have been satisfied with partial success? He shook his head slowly. No, it doesn't. The inheritance wasn't the problem. Michael, the inheritance was the test. It revealed who people really were when they thought they could get away with anything. And who am I? What did the test reveal about me? That you're someone who can learn from mistakes, someone who can choose growth over resentment, someone who can rebuild trust through actions rather than words. We sat in comfortable silence, watching the waves crash against the shore. The ocean was eternal, patient, powerful. It reminded me that some things endure while others wash away. I have something to tell you, I said finally. I've been working with Mr. Patterson on a new will. Michael tensed slightly. Oh? I'm leaving everything to charity. The house will become a refuge for seniors who've been financially abused by family members. The money will fund legal aid for elderly victims of financial fraud. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he smiled. That's perfect, Mom. Really perfect. You're not disappointed? I'm proud. This inheritance has caused nothing but trouble for our family, turning it into something that helps people make sense. There is one exception, I added. I'm leaving you Harold's collection of first edition books, not because they're valuable, but because you used to love reading with me when you were little. I want you to remember the good parts of our relationship. Michael's eyes filled with tears. Thank you, Mom. That means more to me than any amount of money could. As I prepared for bed that night in Harold's beautiful house, I reflected on the journey that had brought me here. 3 years ago, I'd been an ordinary widow living quietly on my pension. Then came the inheritance, the betrayal, the legal battles, and finally, the peace. Harold had been right. The money had given me freedom, but not the kind I'd expected. It had freed me from the obligation to accept poor treatment from family members. It had freed me from the need to choose peace over self-respect. Most importantly, it had freed me to discover that I was much stronger than I'd ever imagined. Tomorrow, I'd continue the work of turning my traumatic experience into something helpful for others. But tonight, I'd simply be grateful for the journey that had led me to understand that true wealth isn't about having money. It's about having the wisdom to use whatever power you possess to protect yourself and others from those who would exploit kindness for personal gain. The inheritance had tested everyone in my life. Some had failed spectacularly. Others had surprised me with their integrity. But the person who'd learned the most was me. I'd learned that being kind doesn't require being naive, that forgiveness doesn't mean accepting abuse, and that sometimes the best way to love someone is to refuse to enable their worst impulses. As I drifted off to sleep in my sanctuary by the sea, I whispered a prayer of gratitude to Harold for giving me not just an inheritance, but an education in the true nature of people and the real meaning of family. Money had revealed who everyone truly was, and I'd finally learned to trust what I saw rather than what I hoped to see. The woman who'd been pushed down the stairs by her daughter-in-law was gone forever. In her place was someone stronger, wiser, and infinitely more careful about who she allowed into her circle of trust. The inheritance had cost me a son and gained me a community. It had cost me illusions and gained me truth. And in the end, that had been the most valuable gift of all. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.